My name is Morgan Adams, 32 years old, the forgotten middle child. I arrived home for Thanksgiving, carrying silence heavier than any suitcase. The Adams mansion glittered with wealth, but my heart trembled with dread. For years, I was invisible, overlooked, dismissed like an unwanted shadow. That night, my father lifted his glass and destroyed what little remained. His words cut sharper than knives, carving me out of my own family. I watched my brother smirk, my sister film, my mother sip wine. I sat frozen, heart pounding, realizing betrayal had become our family tradition. Yet beneath my black dress beat a secret they never imagined possible. They thought I was weak, unworthy, incapable of carrying the Adams legacy. What they didn't know was I had already built my own empire, and before dessert was served, I would turn their betrayal into revenge. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and share in the comments if you've ever faced family betrayal. I grew up in a house that sparkled like polished silver in sunlight. 6 bedrooms, a heated pool, 3 gardeners. It looked like perfection outside. But inside those walls, love felt conditional, measured, and painfully selective. My father, Harold Adams, saw only business, legacy, and his chosen successor. Every conversation at dinner circled back to him, his empire, his pride. My mother, Diane, stayed silent, sipping Chardonnay and smoothing every tension. She believed peacekeeping was strength, but silence only deepened my loneliness. Her smile was practiced, her laughter rehearsed, her silence louder than words. She was a wife who lived in shadows, avoiding conflict at all cost. When I pleaded for her support, she would whisper, "Let it go." But letting go meant letting pieces of myself disappear year after year. My older brother, Garrett, was the golden child with empty hands. He partied, spent recklessly, and wasted hours on boats with girlfriends. Still, father praised him endlessly, insisting Garrett was the future of Adams. I remember him stumbling home drunk, slurring excuses, and still being excused. Father would pat his shoulder, declaring, "One day, you'll lead us all." And I, sitting nearby with a fresh idea or new design, would be told, "That's sweet, Morgan, but this is real business talk." My younger sister, Megan, chased fame with selfies, clothes, and filtered perfection. Her curated lifestyle drew thousands of followers, which father oddly admired. He bragged about her brand deals as if they were stock acquisitions. She filmed our dinners, posting captions about Adam's legacy while sipping champagne. I often wondered if she realized her followers loved only a performance. But father saw influence as power, and power always impressed him more. And then there was me, Morgan, stuck quietly between a son and starlet. I was the one who loved circuits more than cocktails and cameras. At 12, I spent nights coding, while others laughed in manicured gardens. At 15, I built an app that solved problems no one understood. I dreamed of showing father, dreamed he'd see brilliance in his middle child. Instead, he dismissed me with a chuckle, calling my work schoolgirl imagination. Those words cut deeper than knives, leaving scars no one could see. Every Thanksgiving, I sat silently while father toasted Garrett's imaginary brilliance. Every Christmas, I watched Megan twirl for cameras while mother poured wine. I tried to speak, to contribute, but father's gaze silenced me quickly. "Leave the business to men," he'd repeat, and the table nodded along. I learned to smile politely, even when my chest felt like breaking. The loneliness of being unseen by your own family is indescribable. At MIT, I pushed harder, chasing degrees in computer science and business. Graduating with honors should have been proof enough of my worth. When I finally earned the chance to pitch my idea to the board, I believed it would be my moment, the one that changed everything. I walked into the mahogany boardroom, laptop under one arm, heart racing. My presentation promised a future with cloud solutions years before competitors moved. 10 minutes in, father sighed loudly, waving me off with visible annoyance. He told the board my ideas were impractical, academic fluff, not real business. The men chuckled, shaking their heads, as though I were a child playing. I packed my laptop, cheeks burning, while they continued without missing a beat. That humiliation branded me, a scar I carried more than any degree. That night, I sat on my childhood bed, staring at old trophies. The room felt like a museum of someone my father had never seen. I realized nothing I achieved would change the way he measured worth. So I left Boston, not with triumph, but with heartbreak, heavy as stone. I boarded a one-way flight to San Francisco, clutching $5,000. My father told everyone I had stormed off in a tantrum. "Don't worry," he whispered to Mother. "She'll crawl back when money runs out." But I didn't crawl back. I clawed forward inch by painful inch. San Francisco was not glamorous. My first apartment smelled of mold. Roaches skittered across the floorboards. Neighbors shouted through paper-thin walls. I survived on ramen, cheap coffee, and hope that refused to die. I worked 80-hour weeks, days at entry-level coding jobs, nights freelancing projects. Every dollar saved went into my dream, into a company no one knew. I called it Everest Holdings, building quietly, carefully under a pseudonym, Emmy Stone. The initials hid me, Morgan Elizabeth, reinvented as someone worth respect. I wanted my success judged on merit, not on the Adams name. For years, I lived between exhaustion and determination, carrying rejection like fuel. There were nights I wept, wondering if Father had been right all along. Nights I wished he could see me, just once, and say, "I'm proud." But silence met me at every turn. Silence from him, silence from home. I stayed away during holidays, sending polite excuses, avoiding the pain of invisibility. Each call I made ended the same way, Father asking little, caring less. Mother's voice carried weariness, but she never asked questions that mattered. And Garrett and Megan? They never called at all, except for appearances. Years passed, Everest grew, and still my family thought I was struggling. They had no idea the girl they dismissed had become someone powerful. Yet inside me lingered that small ache, the ache of being unseen. No matter what I built, I still longed for recognition that never came. And so the cracks in our family grew wider, unbridgeable, and permanent. By the time Everest Holdings reached real success, my family still doubted. To them, I was invisible, the child who would eventually crawl home. They never asked how I survived, never cared enough to know my progress. It was easier for them to believe I had failed in silence. The truth was, Everest had grown into a powerhouse across 3 cities. I owned majority shares, managed brilliant employees, and commanded respect everywhere but home. In the tech world, Emmy Stone was a mystery admired for innovation. But inside my family, I was still Morgan, the overlooked daughter, the afterthought. Holidays became harder. Each Christmas, Father toasted Garrett as future CEO. He bragged about Megan's followers, as if popularity equaled power or contribution. Meanwhile, I sat silently, hiding my achievements beneath modest smiles and vague answers. The weight of their ignorance pressed down heavier than any corporate challenge. One Christmas, Father raised his glass to Garrett's new promotion at the company. I had just secured millions in funding for Everest, yet no one asked. That silence burned hotter than humiliation. It was pure erasure of my existence. Garrett basked in attention, repeating ideas I had whispered years earlier as his own. Father nodded proudly, blind to the theft, while I was expected to applaud. Megan filmed it all for followers, painting us as a perfect dynasty. I wanted to scream, but I swallowed rage and let silence consume me. I knew then I could not wait for recognition that would never come. If Father refused to see me, I would force him to look, not with tears or begging, but with undeniable, unshakable power. So I sharpened my focus, building Everest into a weapon for reckoning. I quietly acquired shares in companies tied directly to Adams Software's survival. Each move was legal, precise, a chess game my father never noticed. For once, his blindness worked in my favor. He underestimated me completely. Months before Thanksgiving, I sent a proposal under an anonymous name, Project Phoenix. It offered partnership, not domination, a chance to modernize without losing control. Father dismissed it instantly, calling it insulting, never reading beyond the first page. That rejection sealed his fate, proving pride mattered more than progress or family. The closer Thanksgiving came, the more restless I grew, carrying secrets alone. I prepared documents, contracts, acquisitions, all signed and waiting for announcement. My assistant asked if I wanted my executive team in Boston with me. "No," I said firmly. "This is personal. I must face them alone." I packed deliberately. Armani suits, Chanel dresses, subtle diamonds, symbols of success. Every tailored jacket, every pair of heels became armor for the battlefield ahead. Flying private felt indulgent, but this trip demanded a statement I couldn't ignore. As the jet crossed the country, I studied contracts, rehearsed words, calmed nerves. Arriving at the mansion, I carried myself with poise I had earned. Mother greeted me warmly, eyes flickering at the Rolex on my wrist. "You look different," she whispered, though her wine glass trembled slightly. Different, yes, because I had finally stepped into who I was. Father barely looked up from his desk, muttering greetings before answering his phone. On his table lay the Everest acquisition folder, my company's logo clear. My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm, almost casual, almost amused. He thought he was negotiating with strangers. In truth, he was negotiating with me. Garrett sneered when he saw me, already drinking before dinner even started. "Still with that little startup?" He laughed, while his girlfriend giggled beside him. Megan breezed in, filming herself, kissing my cheek, narrating for her followers. "You look expensive, sis. Finally find a rich boyfriend?" she teased lightly. Dinner began with silver candlesticks, gleaming china, and Father's usual performance. Garrett bragged about his yacht, Megan filmed dessert, Mother poured her fifth glass, and I sat at the far end, far from recognition, far from acceptance. The weight of years pressed on me, pushing me closer to eruption. When Father tapped his knife against the crystal glass, the room hushed instantly. He smiled with authority, ready to unveil his plan like a victorious general. "I've decided to sell Adam's software," he announced, voice heavy with finality. Gasps filled the room. Garrett choked, Megan cried. Mother stiffened in drunken silence. Then came the twist of the knife, sharper than all before. "The proceeds," Father declared, "will fund retirement and charity, not your inheritance." Garrett exploded. Megan wailed for her followers. Chaos erupted across the table. I stayed silent, my rage steady, knowing this was only the beginning. Inside me, anger burned, not just at money or legacy denied. It was years of dismissal, rejection, and betrayal, all compressed into this moment. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt the storm gathering. And I knew, before dessert, I would unleash it in ways they never imagined. The table fell silent after Father's announcement, chaos rippling through every corner. Garrett slammed his fist, demanding answers. Megan cried while live-streaming her disbelief. Mother sipped wine, eyes wide, caught between loyalty and quiet resignation. And me? I stayed calm, spooning pecan pie, waiting for my moment. When the shouting subsided, I set down my fork and raised my voice. "I have one question," I said evenly, my eyes locked on Father. "Who is the buyer?" The words silenced the room more than anger did. Father's chest swelled with pride, savoring the authority he still believed he held. "A tech firm," he boasted. "Everest Holdings, $50 million. More than generous." Megan gasped into her phone. Garrett paled. Mother blinked in drunken surprise. But my heart raced, not from shock, only from the secret I carried. I inhaled slowly, then spoke words I had rehearsed in silence for years. "Actually, Dad," I said, voice calm as steel, "I am Everest Holdings." The air thickened. For a moment, only the ticking grandfather clock responded. Garrett's wine glass tipped, red spilling like blood across the white tablecloth. Megan froze, phone still raised, recording the single most dramatic moment of her life. Father laughed, brittle and disbelieving. "Don't be ridiculous. Everest is led by Emmy Stone." I reached into my bag, slid a platinum card across the polished table. "Emmy Stone," I whispered. "Morgan Elizabeth Stone, that's me. I built it all." He picked up the card, staring as though it might dissolve in his hand. "You're lying," he snapped, but the edge in his voice betrayed uncertainty. I leaned forward, my voice low and unwavering, sharp enough to cut glass. "Everest now controls your suppliers, your biggest clients, and tomorrow it controls you." Gasps echoed again. Garrett cursed loudly. Megan whispered to her audience in disbelief. Garrett shot to his feet, pointing at me with trembling rage. "This is espionage, siege!" he shouted. "You've spied on us, stolen what's ours." "No," I corrected coldly. "I used public reports. I outworked you, that's all." His fury was real, but beneath it I saw fear. He knew the truth. Father's face turned crimson, anger erupting like fire struggling against suffocating smoke. "You will not take my company," he growled. "This deal is over now." I straightened, refusing to flinch. "The contracts are signed. The board approved everything. Tomorrow at 9, the press release goes public. Everest already owns Adam's software." His chair scraped violently as he stood, trembling with rage and disbelief. "You can't be both my daughter and the enemy who stole everything." "That's where you're wrong," I whispered, my voice calm but heavy with ache. "I've always been both. You just refuse to see me for who I am." Megan lowered her phone at last, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "So, you're our boss now?" she asked, voice small, suddenly fragile. "Technically, yes," I said, though my words carried more weight than triumph. Because I knew, in claiming victory, I had destroyed what family remained. Mother leaned closer, her eyes glassy, lips trembling with words unsaid. "Morgan," she murmured, "all these years, you carried this secret, and we never knew." Her hand reached for mine, but I pulled back, my resolve unbroken. This was not the time for comfort. This was the time for truth. Garrett's rage boiled over again. He leaned across the table, face twisted with fury. "You planned this. You came here to humiliate us, to humiliate Dad." His voice cracked, and for a brief second, fear overtook his bravado. He knew what this meant. His future, his safety net, slipping through my fingers. Megan wiped her cheeks quickly, already calculating angles for her next post. "This changes everything," she muttered, more to her followers than to me. Even in ruin, she thought of her brand before the blood in her family. Her vanity made me ache, but I had no energy left to correct her. Father remained standing, gripping the edge of the table with white knuckles. His pride bled into fury, but beneath the anger was something else, fear. For the first time, he realized the company he had worshipped could slip away. And worse, it was his daughter, the daughter he had dismissed, who now held it. I met his eyes, refusing to look away, refusing to shrink anymore. "You humiliated me once, told a boardroom my ideas were worthless nonsense. You laughed as they dismissed me, while Garrett stole credit and Megan performed. I built Everest from the ground up because you forced me into exile." The words tasted bitter on my tongue, but they burned with truth. For years I had dreamed of this moment, the reversal of power. And now, standing before them, I felt the weight of triumph and loss. Because in winning, I had not only claimed the company, I had ended the illusion. Silence fell again, but it was heavier now, filled with recognition and dread. The chandelier flickered above us, shadows stretching long across the mahogany walls. Mother clutched her glass tighter. Garrett slumped back into his chair, defeated. And Father stared at me, chest rising and falling, a man dethroned. For years, I had been invisible. Tonight, I was undeniable. And whether they saw me as daughter, rival, or stranger, I no longer cared. The storm had broken, and there was no turning back from its path. Garrett's voice cracked as he shouted again, trying to reclaim control. "You can't do this. I've given my life to this company." I met his rage with cold silence before delivering the final blow. "You've given nothing, Garrett, except stolen funds and empty promises you never kept." He froze, eyes widening. "What are you talking about?" His voice trembled now. I stood, sliding a folder across the table, my evidence neatly organized. $300,000, I said. Fake vendors, phantom consulting fees, offshore accounts. Gasps filled the room as Garrett's face drained of color, sweat shining his forehead. "You're lying," he hissed, but the proof lay heavy in black and white. "I have transaction records, IP logs, account numbers, all pointing directly to you." Mother covered her mouth with shaking hands. Megan angled her phone toward Garrett's shock. For once, my sister forgot her brand. She smelled blood in the water. Garrett's voice dropped to a desperate whisper, his bravado crumbling into fragments. "I did it for the company," he pleaded, "to secure important deals." But his eyes darted wildly, and everyone knew he was cornered by truth. "No," I said firmly, "you did it for yourself, and you nearly destroyed us." He lunged toward me, but Father's voice thundered, stopping him in his tracks. "Sit down," he roared, though even his command carried less weight tonight. Garrett collapsed into his chair, fists clenched, a cornered man stripped of power. For the first time, he looked smaller, weaker than I had ever seen. I turned to Megan, who still clutched her phone like a lifeline. "And you," I said evenly, "what do you contribute besides filters and hashtags?" She bristled, tossing her hair. "I built my brand. Millions follow me daily." "Followers don't keep servers running, Megan. Selfies don't pay developer salaries or secure clients." Her lips quivered. For once, she had no comeback ready, no witty defense. Even her audience, still watching, would see the cracks behind her perfect facade. She lowered her phone slowly, as if the weight of reality pressed it down. The silence around her was worse than scolding. It was undeniable dismissal. Finally, I faced Father, who stood frozen, pride bleeding into disbelief. His company, his throne, his chosen heirs, all stripped bare in one evening. "You built Adam's software with grandfather's foundation," I said, voice firm and steady. "But you let arrogance blind you. You chose loyalty to ego over vision." He tried to interrupt, but I pressed forward, not giving him an inch. "You mocked my ideas, silenced my voice, and handed power to incompetence. You told me rejection was protection, but it was chains around my future. So I broke them, Dad. I built something stronger, bigger, without your approval." His lips parted, but no sound came. He was a man unmasked. The room, once his kingdom, now felt like a courtroom with me presiding. Every gaze turned toward him, not with admiration, but with judgment and pity. For the first time in my life, he looked smaller than I did. The words cut deeper than any knife, and for once, he had no reply. His shoulders sagged, his jaw clenched, his empire collapsing before his eyes. It wasn't just a company anymore. It was the measure of his legacy, and I had taken it from him, fair, legal, unstoppable. Garrett slumped, mumbling excuses, his voice swallowed by the weight of shame. Then he looked at me, desperate, eyes wet with unspoken pleas. "Morgan, please, you can't destroy me. I'm your brother," he whispered hoarsely. I leaned back, unmoved. "You destroyed yourself long before I arrived tonight." Megan wiped her smeared mascara, but even she could not edit this downfall. For the first time, she asked without sarcasm, "What happens to us now?" Her voice shook, not with pity for me, but with fear for herself. She knew her golden lifestyle, funded by legacy, was crumbling beneath her feet. Mother whispered my name softly, almost reverently, as if she barely recognized me. She had seen me invisible for years. Now she saw me unstoppable. I had not just taken back power, I had rewritten the family hierarchy. And the look in her eyes told me she finally understood. For years I had been underestimated, pushed aside, humiliated in silence. Now I stood at the head of the table, every eye fixed on me. I no longer needed their approval. I had their attention, their fear, their respect. Revenge was not loud. It was steady, undeniable, carved into this moment. The chandelier above flickered, shadows dancing across faces twisted with disbelief. Everything had shifted. The dynasty Father worshipped was no longer his alone. It belonged to me, to the woman they once dismissed as Sweet Morgan. And in that moment, for the first time, I savored being truly seen. The dining room felt colder after the storm, though candles still flickered. Plates of untouched food lay scattered. The Thanksgiving feast turned battlefield. I stood in silence, listening to the echoes of everything broken tonight. Power had shifted, truth had been spoken, and the hierarchy was rewritten. Yet as I looked at my family, defeated, trembling, uncertain, I felt no joy. The revenge I had chased for 10 years was finally mine to hold, but it burned less sweet than I imagined, tasting of ash and sorrow. Victory had weight, and that weight pressed heavier than any humiliation before. Later that night, I returned to my childhood room, frozen in time. Posters still lined the walls, trophies still glittered with dust, journals stacked neatly. I sat on the edge of the bed, the same one from youth. Here dreams were born and crushed. Here my exile had silently begun. For hours I stared at old notes of my first coding projects. The same handwriting that built Everest Holdings had once begged for recognition. Now I no longer begged. I commanded, I conquered, I stood unshakable. And still, deep inside, a whisper asked if this victory was enough. Morning arrived with gray skies and thin sunlight over the Adams estate. I walked downstairs to find Father already seated, coffee steaming in his hands. His posture was not defiant anymore. It carried the sag of resignation. He looked up slowly, his eyes hollow but strangely clearer than before. "The lawyers confirmed everything," he said, his voice stripped of former thunder. "The sale is done. Adam's software belongs to you now, doesn't it?" I nodded, bracing for another fight, but instead he let out a sigh. "For years I wanted you invisible, but you outgrew even my blindness." It was not forgiveness, not an apology, but it was something close. I sat across from him, no longer the child begging at his table. "I never wanted to destroy you, Dad," I admitted, voice softer than steel. "I only wanted to be seen, to be treated as capable, as equal." For a long moment, he said nothing, then placed his cup down slowly. "You've surpassed me," he whispered. "And that frightens me more than it angers me." The words carved through me, heavy and fragile, equal parts balm and wound. At last, he saw me, but too late to change the scars already made. In the following weeks, the house shifted with strange new rhythms of power. Garrett avoided me at first, his shame too raw for conversation or defense. But when cornered with undeniable evidence, he finally agreed to repay stolen funds. He left for business school, humbled, stripped, but perhaps finally ready to grow. Megan, ever pragmatic, reinvented herself as a tech heiress rebranded for purpose. She posted about resilience, about women in business, about family reconciliation. Though shallow, her influence strangely helped soften the company's new public image. And for the first time, she called me before posting, asking, not assuming. Mother changed most of all. She put away the endless wine glasses. She joined community programs for women's education, speaking softly but powerfully in meetings. She admitted her failures to me, not in shame but in honest reflection. And though late, her presence began to heal wounds that had festered too long. As for Father, he accepted the role of Chairman Emeritus, name without power. He lingered in the office, offering advice when asked, silence when not. He never said the words, "I'm proud," but sometimes his eyes betrayed them. And that was enough for me, enough to loosen anger's grip on my chest. 6 months later, the Adams building bore a new name, Adams Everest Technologies. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, open spaces buzzing with young ambition. My portrait hung beside grandfathers and fathers, not hidden, not diminished, but equal. 3 generations, 3 legacies, and for the first time, mine stood undeniable. I learned that success without reconciliation is hollow, victory without healing incomplete. Yes, I had taken my revenge, but I had also built bridges. The empire was stronger now, not because I destroyed them, but because I rebuilt. And in rebuilding, I rebuilt myself, from forgotten daughter to fearless leader. Thanksgiving arrived again, smaller this time, without the hollow rituals of before. No crystal glasses clinked in arrogance, no false toasts of inherited glory. Instead, we sat simply, each voice heard, each story shared without competition. For the first time in memory, I felt not anger, but something like peace. I had carried anger like a sword for so long it scarred me. Now I laid it down, not in surrender, but in quiet triumph. I had won, not just by taking power, but by reclaiming myself. And the girl who once sat invisible at this table was gone forever. If my story touched you, please subscribe and share your own experiences. Leave a comment below. Have you ever fought for recognition in your family? Your words might inspire others still trapped in silence. And remember, the truest victory isn't revenge, but the peace you build after.